Good morning, microbiome friends. I am going to share my screen and we're going to talk about a blog post. It's one of Ken's customers, Katie Garrett, and I'm going to read this to you. Okay, it says you're in the process of making dinner and you're wondering, should I really add all that salt in the recipe? You grind some over your meal and wonder if you should be using less. Doesn't salt cause high blood pressure, but isn't it a necessary nutrient? Can we use it freely or is it bad for your health? Salt, also known as sodium chloride, is an essential nutrient. That means your body needs it in order to function. However, there's a narrow range in which it is healthy for the body. When you go over that limit, there are negative consequences, much like sugar. All right, so salt and cardiovascular disease. It's a well-known issue. Caused by salt is cardiovascular disease. Large studies of thousands of people instructed to reduce intake have found a 25% reduction in the risk of cardiovascular event. The subjects were eating over 1,000 milligrams more than the recommended amount and were taught how to limit their intake to 1,500 milligrams. So when the body is functioning properly, it keeps blood pressure stable in response to high sodium intake. It does this through adaptation, much like the way our metabolism decreases if we eat too little in order to keep us alive. In fact, salt-induced high blood pressure is actually a disorder. It's called salt sensitivity. On average, only about 50% people with hypertension are classified as salt sensitive. So this means that half the people reduced intake does not normalize the blood pressure. Therefore, it's clear that salt is not the only root cause. Indeed, it looks like salt sensitivity may be caused by an endothelial dysfunction, which basically means inflamed arteries. Now, it's important to point out that a high salt diet over a long period of time creates inflamed arteries. However, these diets are also associated with fast food, processed food, hot dogs, packaged foods. So it's hard to say if it's really the salt that's causing the dysfunction. To further this point, risk of being salt sensitive increases as we age and as weight and blood sugar increase. So while the salt might be a trigger, it appears that the health of the body consuming it is what determines the effect. So let's talk about this salt and inflammation. For some people, salt is the trigger for inflammation, whereas for others, they have a different trigger. For example, a 2019 review study explained how the products coming from the microbes that live in our gastrointestinal tract actually regulate blood pressure. When there's an imbalance in our gut microbiome, it can lead to high blood pressure. But let's look back to good old sodium chloride. I just said it can be an inflamed trigger. Let's look into that a little deeper so we can make a wise decision about how much we eat. It has been discovered that a pro-inflammatory compound called Th17 is increased with high salt intake. Folks, this isn't good. Th17 is also implicated as the main player in creating autoimmune disease. Furthermore, salt can increase your white blood cells' ability to damage your body by increasing the level of inflammatory compounds released by certain white blood cells. Increase in salt intake has also been shown to increase lupus disease activity in genetically prone mice. Indeed, sodium chloride increased an inflammatory compound that is associated with the development and perpetuation of multiple sclerosis, inflammatory bowel disease, such as Crohn's, rheumatoid arthritis, and psoriasis. Salt in the gut. This will come as no surprise to my regular readers. The gut microbiome controls much of this process. Study shows that probiotic strains in the Lactobacillus family significantly decline with high salt intake. A group of researchers that provided that strain of probiotic to mice and it neutralized the negative effects of salt. Without the probiotic, the mice experienced both an autoimmune flare and high blood pressure. As further evidence of a sodium gut in connection, let's look at a study on bloating. 412 people ate a high fiber diet, then a low fiber diet, and sequentially ate these diets with low, moderate, and high sodium. Results showed that regardless of fiber intake, bloating increased as salt increased. To me, this is a very pretty mind-blowing stuff for many reasons. We want to avoid high sodium intake, though we also have to remember that it's not as simple as salt causing disease. If you're doing a lot in your life to quiet the inflammatory fire within, any inflammatory caused by salt will quickly be put out. Indeed, studies show that Asian countries where there is a very high salt intake and a much healthier diet than the US, there's much lower prevalence of hypertension and autoimmunity. So what do? The FDA recommends up to 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. For those with high blood pressure or heart issues, 15 milligrams is recommended. The average American consumes 3,400 milligrams. So how do we consume the right amount that meets our body's needs? Number one, first become aware of your intake by reading nutritional labels, even items that don't taste salty, like granola, snack bars, protein bars often have significant salt. Number two, choose low sodium packaged foods. Think about sauces, dips, chips, crackers, canned foods. Number three, drain or rinse your canned goods. Rinse olives, green beans, regular beans, thoroughly drain tuna. Number four, emphasize fresh or frozen meats and fish in your diet. Limit processed meats such as hot dogs, sausage, bacon, jerky, deli meats. Number five, add less salt to your meals. When cooked, it loses much of its flavor, so only add it after you've planted your food as it's needed. Plated your food if it's needed. Choose a salt-free seasoning like Mrs. Dash, especially if you tend to eat more processed or restaurants foods. Number six, limit restaurant meals twice weekly and avoid or limit sauces. Alternatively, split an entree and order a salad. If you bring your own salad dressing, trial-size bottles, or ask for olive oil, vinegar, and lemon, sauces can have a day's worth of salt in one serving. You might already meet your salt quota for the day just by having chips and salsa. 7, when eating out at a national chain, look up your nutritional menu so you choose a lower salt sodium option. Remember, the goal is not to avoid salt. While it's not as bad as adding sugars, or indeed does not need to be moderated, however, how much sodium do you think you're eating, and what are the biggest sources in your diet? Leave a comment below. All right, so I just reviewed a blog by Katie Garrett on salt. And this was sparked because of a podcast she heard Kiran Krishnan talk about the salt in the microbiome. So she researched it and verified that salt can be very inflammatory. So it's very important to be conscious of it. So again, you can check this blog out. This is the link, katiegarrett.com/salt -and-healthy. So I just wanted to put that out there, and then gonna start a discussion on that. So I will stop the recording there because I have some comments about Himalayan salt versus regular bleached salt. So here we go. So we'll stop the recording.